What I want you to understand in this moment is this is much more than, oh, we shouldn't do that now. It's a big deal. It's normal for the world to complain about circumstances, about things. But for the people of God who have been rescued from death and given life, for us to complain shows contempt towards our Lord, towards our God. And God communicates that He's testing them. He communicates that it's a test. And one of the questions that we have to wrestle with this morning, that we have to wrestle with honestly every day is will God put you in situations where you don't have what you need, and then He'll add something to your life that maybe you don't want? And the question is, yeah. I mean, as we see in this text this morning, God, I need water. We're thirsty. It's been 3 days. I need water. Hey, here's water, but it's bitter water. Like, what? God, no, that's not what I'm talking about. You don't understand. I need water. The people react. And so much of life, as you and I have experienced, it's not so much what happens, but how we respond to what happens, right? And so we see how these people respond. And in verse 24, they grumbled against Moses. It says the people grumbled against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? Right? We just saw them cross the Red Sea. We just saw them experience an unbelievable miracle. 3 days later, they're hit with a crisis. And how do they respond? With grumbling. With grumbling. They don't sing songs of God's strength. They don't sing songs of God's power, of God's faithfulness. They grumble against Him. And it doesn't come across as like they're just kind of worried, like, hey, Moses, we're a little thirsty. We don't know what your plan is here. Like, they're grumbling against Moses, as they often have up to this point, and as they often will continue to do. They lose perspective. And so, before we mock them, I think it's easy to go through this series, Can I Still Experience God? Read through this story, read through how God has been working to release Pharaoh's, tight grip on these people, to release them from captivity, and see all the different ways they react and kind of be like, are y'all kidding me? Really? Like, do you not just remember what happened 3 days ago? But the reality is that every single one of us do the same thing as well. And if you don't believe me, right, we just sang songs of worship just, moments ago. And I want you to catch yourself today as you leave this place, how often or if you find yourself leaning towards complaining and grumbling as you leave the rest of your Sunday. Just singing moments of God's faithfulness, of His praise, of His glory, of His power. And then when a little moment of adversity comes, what do you and I do? We grumble. That's our natural lean, and so we got to be careful. And what I want you to understand in this moment is this is much more than, oh, we shouldn't do that now. It's a big deal. And we understand that you and I, we have a fleshly lean towards complaining. And what makes that hard and what makes that tragic is for the people of God, right? It's normal for the world to complain about circumstances, about things. But for the people of God who have been rescued from death and given life, to the covenant people of God, for us to complain shows contempt towards our Lord, towards our God. So it's much more than, oh, you shouldn't do that. And what I've been wrestling with, and maybe what you felt just in that moment when I shared that, is like you start to like downplay it a little bit. Like, oh, it's really not that big of a deal. And honestly, I'm not complaining about God. I'm not complaining about His strength or His goodness. I'm just complaining about my work, my job. I'm not complaining about God and His power and His strength. I'm complaining about my boss. I'm not complaining about God. I'm just complaining about the people in my community group. I just don't get along with them. I'm not complaining. We just kind of downplay it like we're not complaining to God. We love God. He's great. He's perfect. But I'm just going to complain about the circumstances and the things that I navigate on in everyday life and not think that I'm complaining about God. Well, later on in chapter 16, verse 8, Moses says, your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord. And we'll get to that story here in just a second. So to complain about your circumstances is honestly to criticize God, to criticize your Maker. That would be, for example, it's Thanksgiving week. I'm excited. I pray that you all have so much joy and just are able to gather with friends and family. But that'd be like you invited me over for your Thanksgiving meal. And I walk into the house and I immediately get in there and I'm like, what's that smell? That smells disgusting. Like that's gross. And then what would you do? You'd be like, excuse me. I'm like, hey, why are you taking offense to that? I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the food. Why? That smells terrible. What is that? What happened here? Why does that food smell so bad? And you're like, you're getting defensive, right? Why? Because if I'm criticizing the food, who am I also criticizing? The cook, right? If you read a book and you criticize the book, you're criticizing the author. And so there's a reality here that we have to wrestle with, to just whine about our circumstances. And when we don't acknowledge God in them, that what you're communicating is that he's irrelevant and that he only shows up in the good, powerful, big moments. And that communicates the wrong thing in our hearts. And so we need to look at that. And so when we aren't looking at God in the midst of our circumstances, what we miss out on is when the world sees us grumbling about our circumstances, they don't see God's glory within us. And that's confusing as the people of God. We're people made for the glory of God. And so if we miss out on moments of glorifying God in the midst of our circumstances, we're missing out on powerful ministry moments.